So now what we're going to do is our final step for this edit, which is the color correction and the color grading process. Now, there's really a few main reasons we're doing this. We're doing this to correct any mistakes in exposure that our camera may have had when filming our footage. We want to fix these mistakes so that there's a clean look and a similar look across all the clips in our timeline, in our video, so nothing looks out of balance, nothing looks out of place, right? That's something that's not professional, that as soon as someone sees that, they instantly have a opinion about the level of quality of the video. So we first want to start by fixing any of those issues. Once we do that, we go into the color grading phase, where we can then create a layer of stylizing on top of our footage that makes it look unique. So we're going to get into the basics of that, and later in other more complex edits, we'll get even more into detail on creating a specific look. So let's get into it. What I'm going to do first is mute our music. Because we have our video locked, we're not making any more edits or changes on our cuts, on our pacing, on adding any cool little visual transitions or updates. That's not what this process is about. All those should be done by the time you get to this color correction and color grading process. So I'm going to mute our music to smoothly scrub through our timeline without any distractions. We're just purely focusing on visuals. So I can instantly see that the blacks, and what I've been saying is blacks and darks, every image that you shoot is made up of contrast between the color. It's not a color dark, but it's a quality of dark black, right? There's black behind me, there's white here, and the image is made up of different ratios between the black and the white. And that combination creates everything that you're seeing. And then there's color as well. We have blue, we have orange, we have green here as well. All those are making up our image. So in this step, we want to balance out those different aspects of our edit. Now here, I can see that the way the camera was exposing, because I was shooting on an iPhone, I wasn't shooting manually. The camera is trying to do its best to expose, but the contrast and the level at which the darks are at in this image looks really good to my eye. If we go here, that same black of the camera is quite a bit lighter. That means the exposure is higher. So here, the blacks look nice. Here, the blacks look kind of gray, okay? So we're going to fix that. We're going to highlight our clip. We're going to go to the Effects tab, and we're going to type in Lumetri Color, or whatever color correction effect that your editing software uses. And we can either double click or click and drag it onto the clip that we want to apply it to. Open up the Basic Effects tab, and here we have our exposure, which adjusts the brightness of all of the image. We have our contrast, which crushes the blacks and increases the whites, okay? We have our highlights, which just increases the whites. We have our shadows, which just increases or decreases the dark part of the frame. And we have our whites and blacks, which does a very, very similar thing to what the highlights and the shadows do. It's very similar. I don't really use the whites and blacks per se, because look, if we increase the shadows here and get this look and do the same thing here, you can't tell the difference. So I just work with the highlights and shadows. So let's start by decreasing the shadows to try and get a similar exposure on our camera and on the skin tone of our subject. Okay, that's starting to look a lot better. Let's even go down to -40. And now these clips are matching up a lot better. If I undo our color correction layer, that's the original, and that's what we're working with now. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's move to the next shot. The cool thing that we can do is, if we have two very similar shots that need the same color treatment, we can simply copy by selecting the color correction layer that we want to, do Command C, highlighting the clip we want to apply it to, and hit Command V to paste. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to right-click the clip that has the layer that we want to use. Hit copy, go to the clip we want to assign that same exact layer to, and hit paste attributes. Now, here's where we were kind of working with before about copying and pasting the motion of a different clip. We don't want to change the motion and positioning of the clip. We purely just want to apply the coloring effect. So that is the second way to do that process. Okay, these are all looking good. Okay. I think that these last few clips here could use a little bit darker darks similar to what we did here. So I'm going to go ahead and paste what we did by copying and hitting paste on this first clip to see what it does. Okay, I think that's a little bit too dark. These didn't need quite as much of it, so I'm going to do half, and I'm going to do -20. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So now that I know that looks good, I'm now going to copy this new one with -20 instead of -10. I'm going to highlight the rest of the clips that I know need updating. I'm going to hit paste, and let's check out the edit. Okay, that's looking pretty good. We've color corrected the clips in our sequence, and now it's time to add a cool looking stylizing to all the clips. So what we're gonna do is start by creating an adjustment layer in our project panel, hit adjustment layer. I'm gonna hit OK because we don't need to change any of these parameters. We want it to be the same settings as our sequence. And now I'm going to drag this adjustment layer on top of all of our footage. I'm going to drag it out so that it's covering the footage. And nothing is happening yet until we add another color correction layer to this adjustment layer. So now what we can do is globally change the look of all of our shots with one single layer, okay? And this is a perfect time to now hop into adding LUTs or preset looks to your footage. What we do here is scroll down to our creative tab. We're going to go ahead and open that up. And we have our looks function, okay? This has a handful, more than a handful actually, a quaternarium or a veritable plethora quite a few preset looks that we can scroll through. Now, what creates the deciding factor of the look that you go for is the tone of your video. Now, we have kind of a cool, badass filmmaker, James Bond-esque tone here. So we want something that's punchy, and we want something that's maybe a little bit more on the gritty side with a pretty punchy edit and a really in-your-face song. So we're not going to want some like emotional blue nighttime feel. We're going to probably want pretty contrasty, more of the comic book saturation punchiness for this look. So let's see what does work and let's see what doesn't work. So here we scroll to the blue day to night preset. Let's go ahead and play that. Okay. It's a cool look, but we're not really looking for this blues and purples because this is not like a vampire movie like Twilight. So let's find a different look here. Let's keep scrolling down. So these have some greenish tones, kind of that Matrix vibe that we mentioned before. I'm really looking for a coloring that matches with the tone that we're working with in our musical track. That's okay. Too much greens. I think we're wanting more of a punchy golden here for this kind of edit. Okay. So I like the tone of this. Of course, is way too contrasted, and this is got just way too much crushing of the blacks. The darks are too dark, and it just looks too fake. So what we can do is change the intensity of our actual pre-assigned LUT. So if we go to 0, that's our original footage. If we start increasing this, then we can see our transformation happening here. So that's looking pretty dang cool. Let's put this at 40. We don't want it to be too saturated and too colored. So let's see, without, with. And this is a little bit red and a little too orange for my eye. So what we can do is adjust the temperature. This is going to change the blue to orange and yellow shift of our image. So if we have it at 0, we can scoot it down to maybe -10. And this is going to kind of neutralize the over orange and over redness that we are having. Now, if it's still looking a little too red, we can also change the tint. Now, the tint, instead of blue to orange or a little bit of yellow, the tint is the greenish to purple. Now, purple is similar and close to the red in the color spectrum, but if we go to the opposite side and start increasing the green, that's going to actually balance out the excess redness in our image. So this is now having more of a golden feel. If we go back to 0, there's more red. If we go to -10, it has more of a slight green. Okay, we don't want to go too far in the green, but let's say we put that at -4. Okay. And everything is starting to look pretty dang good. If I want to bring a little bit more detail back up from the dark parts of the frame, like here, you can't see any detail in his pants. Here, you can see detail in the camera, which is what we want. That is a little bit dark, I would say. That could be a little bit brighter, and this as well. So what we can do is bring up the shadows, and you can see as I'm bringing up the shadows, we're getting more detail back in the dark parts of the frame. Of course, we don't want to put it at 117 here, because this is not the look that we're going for. But if I put this back at 0, and I push it up just slightly, let's say 15 points, you see that shift of where we're getting detail back in these parts of the frame? We can maybe even go a little bit more. Let's go 20. That's going to give us a better overall exposure. We want our blacks to feel punchy, but we don't want to lose too much detail in our image. So there's a fine-tuned balance as an editor where you want to color correct it so it looks stylized and even better than real life, but you don't want to go too far where when someone sees it, it's like, it's like almost when a dish is too salty or too seasoned. There's a fine balance there. And as kind of a final last change here, we can add a little bit of sharpening. Now, what this is going to do is going to crisp up our image a little bit because a lot of these shots, they're a little bit soft. So they don't have that super clear, crisp clarity that, you really want in your videos. So I'm going to increase this. Let's try 20. We want it to be subtle, but it's just basically going to make our footage look a little bit more high def, a little bit more of a higher resolution. And I'm really liking that. So let's see what it's looking like with our music. Awesome. So that wraps it up for this part of the learning lesson where we dove into color correction and color grading. I'm like really excited to see your edits and what you've put together. So you'll be able to share that in the student Q&A section, and I will see you in the next lecture. Let's say we're super happy with that. We're ready to export it. We're going to save our project. We're going to make sure our in point is set at the very beginning, and we're going to make sure our out point is at the end. We're going to hit O, and it's perfect. I'm going to go up to File, go down to Export Media, make sure H.264 is clicked, go to Presets. Now this is going to a mobile device, and we want the resolution to be the same as the sequence itself, which is 1080p, so we're going to click that. And we're going to go down to our audio tab. Make sure our bitrate is set to the highest setting. We're going to make sure our basic video settings are matching. To get rid of these black bars, we're going to match our actual sequence by hitting match source. We're going to render it at maximum video depth, use the maximum render quality. And finally, we're going to choose our destination that our edit is going to go to and the name of the export itself. So in our original hype edit folder that we created at the very beginning, many moons and days ago, we're going to create a new folder in there, call this the exports folder, where all of our different exported versions will reside. And we're going to go hype edit, let's say Instagram post version 1. Save, and we're going to hit export. Now we have our final video here. We have our thumbnail at the very beginning, and we have the final product. And if we wanted to send this to something like Instagram, we can queue it up, go to the cover, and it always default chooses the very first frame, which is perfect. And we have our really cool hype edit with a nice looking thumbnail ready to be shared online with the world. That does it for this extra little bonus lesson that I wanted to throw in here with a little extra ninja technique hack for all your future projects. I will see you in the next video lesson.